Hello, my name's Will, and this is Will to Read, my channel where I talk about books. Today I'm going to be doing a review of I Want to Believe, Posadism, UFOs, and Apocalypse Communism by A.M. Gittlitz. It is a biography of the Argentine Trotskyist J. Posadas. And it was very interesting. So before I get into the review, I do want to just kind of briefly go over the structure, because this is the first review I've done. Just the structure that I'm going to have for these, at least for the nonfiction ones. I might decide to do it slightly differently for the fiction reviews. But at least for the nonfiction reviews, I'm just going to divide it into three different sections. I'm going to start with a summary. Then I'm going to go into a section which I called Threads. It's basically just the major themes and the different ideas that are being proposed in the book, and maybe just different topics that might be of interest to people, and that people interested in these topics might want to check this book out, might have an inclination to check the book out for. Then the last section, which I think will probably end up taking up a good portion of the review, if not the majority, at least probably at least like a third or a half of it, would be end thoughts, which is just me, it's pretty self-explanatory, me giving my thoughts. But before I get into the summary, I have not read anything by A.M. Gittlitz. This is the only book he's published, but he is a journalist. I don't think I've read any of his articles he's written, but I am familiar with him. His podcast, Antifada, it's one of those, it feels like there's 100 of these, but it's one of those left-wing podcasts based in New York, where it's just two or three people just sitting in a room just kind of talking about whatever, and it has a slight politics seems to not even be it seems to be kind of tangential to them. I don't know. I used to listen to a lot of those kinds of podcasts. I think I tried out the Antifada once, and I'd heard so many stuff kind of like it that I just wasn't interested. And that's really the background that I had going into this. I was aware of J. Posadas before getting this book, and it was why I got it. So for those not aware, Posadas has kind of had a reemergence in left-wing spaces over the past decade or so, mostly as a meme. But it has made his people much more aware of his ideas. And I actually read an essay by him, which I don't remember the full title because it's really overly long, but I'm going to refer to it as the Flying Saucer essay, or Flying Saucer speech, which I'll explain more in the Threads section. But anyway, I will say Posadas is an interesting guy, just as a beginning thing. But before I get into too many of my thoughts, let's read the summary. Calling not just for socialism in one country, but throughout the galaxy, this is the incredible story of the Posadists. Named after the Argentine Trotskyist J. Posadas, the movement's sectarian journey through the 20th century revolutionary socialist experiences of guerrilla war, nuclear missile crisis, the 1968 rebellions, and the anti-communist dictatorships is both mind-bendingly paranormal and strangely familiar. I Want to Believe reveals why Posadism continues to capture the imaginations of leftists today and uncovers both a cynicism towards the past and a nostalgia for the earnest belief that a better world is possible. So that's what it is. It's basically, the structure of this book, I want to give briefly just so you understand what it is. It's broken up into three parts. The first part basically is about the build-up to Posadas becoming who we know as Posadas. So it's kind of the build-up to him kind of developing more of an influence within the Trotskyist movement, and also developing more more outlandish ideas, or more less orthodox ideas. I guess would be a better word. And then part 2 is basically the rest of Posadas' life. It's basically just him, just him revealing these ideas and kind of the buildup of this kind of cult of personality around him. And then part 3 is about basically Posadism post-Posadas, basically. So it's about what other prominent members of the movement did, and it's also about internet memes. And I actually saw, I listened to an interview with the author, or part of an interview with the author, and he said that a lot of people just bought the book to read part 3. And I think that that's kind of disappointing because the other two parts are very interesting as well. And I'll get into that in the next section. So the first major thread in this book, I would say, is just discussion of more obscure political movements, or an obscure political movement. And if you're interested in stuff that's just like kind of these weirder, more out there ideas, this is something that you might find interesting. Like there's discussion of his ideas. One of the 3 ideas he's probably most known for nowadays, the idea of like dolphins being deserving to have similar rights to humans, basically, and that he thought that they should be included in the Internationale. For those of you that don't know what an Internationale is, to put it very briefly, I don't want to talk to, I guess it's impossible to not discuss left-wing theory or left-wing history, because this book is left-wing history. So the Internationale, for those of you that don't know, is so communism kind of has this idea of the way to work it is to work across borders, and the Internationale was kind of a means to try to do that. And it's basically just, to put it kind of practically, it was more than this, but there was like a yearly conference where activists from around the world met and gave speeches and updated on the struggle in their various countries and the region, things like that. And I think countries sent representatives and stuff. It was basically like a communist UN, I guess would be a way to describe it. In a way, although I will warn, it does take a bit to get to the weirder stuff, as I kind of said in the summary. It doesn't really get to the more obscure stuff until the second section, so you're going to have to wait a bit before you get to it. So, just keep that in mind if that's what you're coming here for, because that's what I was coming here for. And it did take until 70 pages in to get any hint of that. But another thread through this is the idea of cults, or cults of personality. So towards the end of Posadas' life, and the Posadists broke off, so more leftist history. So the Third Internationale was basically, to my understanding anyway, I'm sure someone will correct me, or someone could correct me on this. There are definitely people that know more about this than I do. But to my understanding, the Third Internationale was basically run by the USSR. They were kind of the heads of it. And so it was majorly run by Stalin at that point. And Trotsky, when he fled the USSR, started his own international, the Fourth Internationale. And that was made up of Trotskyists. Posadas, his group, became the representatives for Argentina in the Fourth Internationale. And eventually, after Trotsky's death, there was a split in the Fourth Internationale, and so Posadas started his own international, his own Fourth Internationale. He still called it the Fourth Internationale. I think it was just like the Posadas Fourth Internationale. Anyway, it's in the book. The particular name is in the book, but it is something along those lines. And the point is that he split from the Fourth Internationale to start his own international. And he kind of becomes it kind of becomes a cult of personality. Posadism kind of becomes a, or at least within the main group that Posadas surrounds himself with. And it kind of becomes a place where like people can get kicked out for disagreeing with him, and like they have to be, there was very strict regimens for different things, and like I think he kept like track of like what people were doing. Like it sounds, I hesitate to call it a cult, but it is definitely came across, at least the way that Gittlitz wrote about it, as very cult adjacent at the very least. And if you're interested in that kind of stuff, this, well, especially section 2 of it, there's a decent amount of stuff for you to chew on there. And then another big thread is, well, I mean, Posadas, he was active during the height of the Cold War. And one of his big theories was that he actually was in favor of nuclear war because he felt that the only way to fast track communism, the world to becoming communist. He basically, I believe the term is in leftist circles used now is called an accelerationist. So he's someone who, he felt that if nuclear war happened, the destruction would cause the destruction of society as we know it, and from the ashes people would build a socialist utopia kind of thing. If you're interested in kind of people's reactions to the Cold War and kind of nuclear Armageddon, this also would be something that's is prevalent within it. Again, mostly section 2, but I think it's discussed a little bit in section 1 as well. But if I'm recalling correctly, again, it's been a couple months since I finished this. The other thing, and this is another thing, this is the other reason that drew it to me and probably stood out to all of you the most who are unfamiliar with this person, and those that are familiar with Posadas and Posadism, the aliens, UFOs. Probably the best known thing on the internet, and probably the most prominent thing in the memes across the internet, is the idea of space comrades, so to speak. So basically, it was this idea of, which actually, fun fact, Posadas, you will learn in the book, Posadas didn't actually have, it was one of the other higher ups in the group, and the only reason Posadas only mentions UFOs in that one speech, that one essay. And the reason he did it was to placate a subgroup of Posadists led by Dante Minizoldi, which basically were very entranced with like this strain of socialism, which has been around for a while. There was a subset of Bolsheviks in Russia as well, who had similar ideas of very much like looking to technology and kind of having this very overtly utopian view of society, and kind of just very inspired by science fiction and things like that. And Posadas basically did it to placate them. And basically what these guys believed is that there are aliens out there, and once we achieve communism, once we achieve socialism, once we get to this global communism, then these aliens will come and they will give us stuff. They will help us form a civilization. We can join the intergalactic, interplanetary international? I don't know what to call that. Space International. It's the Space International. Anyway, but all that Posada said in the speech really is that he said, hey, there might be aliens, and if aliens exist, then we should include them in the International, which, I mean, follows from his ideas about dolphins. And honestly, I think kind of makes sense. I don't know where I land on aliens. I think the belief in aliens is very interesting. But I guess I'm like an agnostic on aliens. I guess my belief is that I think they're out there, but they haven't visited Earth. Anyway, I mean, if you're interested in that, this might actually be a bit disappointing if you're coming to here for the UFOs, because it's a bit anticlimactic. It's not as prevalent as you might think it is, based on the internet presence what is discussed on the internet about Posadas. But yeah, but I mean, there's still a little bit there, and it's a little quirky, I guess. And then I think one thing, and this is discussed in it, really it's just one chapter actually. It's not even the entirety of section 3. It's really just one chapter. Or I guess the last two chapters, I think, is the idea of basically, like, if you're interested in how memes and social media can resurrect and spread ideas, because Posadism, even at the time, wasn't particularly prominent, and it was kind of a joke, or a lot of people saw it as a joke. At the time, it was definitely a subset of a subset of a subset, and it's this small little fringe thing. But it's probably reached more people within the past decade than it had during Posadas' entire lifetime. And I personally think that that's kind of interesting, and interesting how that can spread things, because especially as jokes, and that's really the focus of that particular chapter, is how joking about an idea can kind of plant the seeds for some of the ideas spread in that joke. In this case, utopian communism. Now, yeah. So now I'm gonna do my final thoughts. Hey everyone, this is Will during the editing process, and I just wanted to redo the end thoughts, because the original take I did came across pretty negative, and I did enjoy this book, and I don't want to leave people with a bad impression of it. Before I get to that, though, I did realize I left out a couple interesting things that were in the book that aren't really mentioned in a lot of memes that I thought were quite interesting. One thing that's very of note within his early activism within the Trotskyist movement, and just his general political beliefs, is that he was a supporter of Perón, the dictator, and his main justification for that was that he did like social welfare programs and stuff, and he also was kind of gave up this like veneer of like being of the working class and for the working class or whatever, when in reality it was a lot of that was aesthetics, and Posadas couldn't see through that, and I think it's a good example of the limits of his abilities as a theoretical thinker and political thinker, other than the stuff I already mentioned. But yeah, so he was a supporter of Perón. Yeah, and then I kind of hinted at this, but I want to say this explicitly. So I mentioned that it kind of became a cult of personality, at least within his inner circle. And I do want to mention some of I remembered one of the more out there things that he did to control people, and that was he made all of the members of his inner circle stay celibate, and if they were married, they had to live away from their wives. To the point where I don't remember who, but he relocated at least one person, if not multiple people, within his inner circle. One of them to Italy, I know in particular, to kind of do run things there for the Internationale, the Posadas Fourth Internationale. Yeah, and then eventually, like, the wife moved to Italy because she couldn't stand. She was had been away from her husband for like 3 years or something like that, and it caused Posadas to kick the guy out, and to exile both of them, both the husband and the wife, from the group. Yeah, like any good leader, Posadas he wasn't sticking to the rules he had for his underlings. He was having sex. He was being promiscuous and things. Anyway, so that was kind of something. But anyway, so my thoughts on the book are: if you're coming here for the alien stuff, for the dolphin stuff, for the nuclear war stuff, it's there. And there is some very interesting discussion about, as I mentioned in the last section, there's some very interesting discussion about internet culture and reviving how ideas can spread via jokes and things like that, which was very interesting. If you're coming into this without any background on history of communism, or just like anything like that, then it might be a little bit dense, or it might be a little bit to get into it.
And it does take a little bit. It is good to keep in mind that it does take a bit to get into the more out there political ideas that he had, the alien stuff, as I mentioned in the review. But I do think that it's a very entertaining and interesting book. I did put it on hold for a bit. I feel like I should mention that because I was, during section one, I was getting a little bit bored. But I think once things started rolling, and once I picked it back up, and it got more into like things were rolling a bit more, so to speak, in section two. Then it was very easy to get through, and I was reading it very quickly. I think I got through section three in like 2 days, so which is very good for me. Because usually, it's a when I read for fun. I've mentioned this in I believe the other two videos, but I tend to not. It takes me a while to get through books, at least compared to it seems like a lot of other booktubers. It takes me a bit, and so I don't usually read a lot of pages in a day, and reading 50 pages in 2 days is pretty good for me, especially for a nonfiction book. Is very good for me. It should be a good indication of how engaged I was. Back to past me.
That's it for my review of I Want to Believe by A.M. Gittlitz. Yes, my next video, I'm going to do another review of a book that I finished a couple months ago, but this one's going to be a bit more relevant to horror. It is Darkly. I have it right here. I'm going to be doing a review of Darkly, Black History in America's Gothic Soul by Layla or Leela, I'm not sure which, Taylor. And yeah, so I realized my first two videos I didn't do any call to action, so I guess you're on YouTube. You know what to do. Like the video if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see if you want to see my Darkly review or and stuff I'm gonna do after that. Leave a comment. Yeah, let people know about it the old-fashioned way. Talk to people about my stuff. Send them a letter. Send it a carrier pigeon. You could also, if you have psychic powers, send out a little like brain blast telepathic thing about my channel. I'd really appreciate it. That would be very nice. And anyway, this has been Will to Read, and yeah, I'll see you next time.